Right, good evening,
We
everyone.
can get,
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody to the special council meeting for Wednesday, August the 7th, 2024. I'd like to remind everybody that this meeting will be recorded for public access and broadcast. With that, do I have a motion to call the meeting to order? So moved by Councillor Colwell, seconded by Councillor Oblinas. Questions to the motion? No questions to the motion. All in favor? Aye. Contrary minded, motion carried. Remind everyone that there are conflict of interest declaration forms in the middle of the table. If you do have a conflict, please fill it in and pass it to the clerk's office stating the reason. With that, we'll move on to item number 4, public administration presentations.
I think you adopted the agenda yet.
I think
Or
you
sorry,
did that.
Or call the
We'll
order.
call yes. Sorry.
So item number 4.1 is public hearing rezoning PID 00816140. And as per the Community Planning Act, council is required to hold a public hearing for amendments to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw to provide the public with an opportunity to speak for or against any proposed changes. The act also requires public notification. Public notification was published on the town's website and social media pages, as well as on Plan 360 Southeast Regional Services Commission's website, seeking public comments and proposed amendments on the proposed amendments and setting a date, time, and place for the public hearing. To date, the clerk's office has received only one written item. There have been 2 in-person visits to the clerk's office to review information provided at the public presentation, and 1 email sent directly to councillor with questions, which was also answered.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider written objections, comments received regarding the proposed changes being proposed to the zoning bylaw. I first wanted to provide a brief overview of how the hearing will be conducted. We'll first have a short presentation on the rezoning request from Lori Bickford, one of the planners from Southeast Regional Service Commission. We'll then hear from any members of the public who've submitted written objections or comments, and I do know that our CEO has gone to the participants in the gallery to ask them to sign up should they choose to come forward and speak this evening. Or simply would like to make a comment on the bylaw in general. Any comments being presented must be related specifically to the bylaw, and generally an individual will have the opportunity to speak once unless they have a comment to raise about another individual's presentation. At the end of each presentation, the members of council may ask for clarification from a speaker on any fact or issue, but I just want to very clarify the purpose of tonight is not to enter into a debate. This is not the time to question the members of council. Under the Community Planning Act, the purpose of the public hearing is for the council to consider objections to the bylaw, and therefore discussion or argument involving members of council is inappropriate. There'll be no interruptions while the person is making a presentation. Order must be maintained, and I will call it to order should that not happen. Minutes will be kept. Written submissions and reports may be presented, but copies must be made available. When all presentations have been completed, the public hearing will close. Council thanks everyone for their interest and cooperation throughout this public hearing. Ms. Bickford, I'll now turn things over to you.
Wait till the presentation gets lined up here.
And I'd like to welcome everybody as well, by the way. This is probably the biggest people amount we've had in the gallery, which does show great interest, and I appreciate that. I tried to pause, Lori. Is it good enough?
Perfect. Perfect time. So there's actually 3 components to this. So there's the first part, which is combined, which would be a municipal plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment. So that's typically what you call a rezoning request. We have to change the municipal plan as well. It's called the future land use map. So you'll see me talking about that first, which will be the more specific of the Dundee property itself. And then the second component to that would be the third bylaw amendment, which would be a text amendment to lot area requirements for multiple buildings in Salisbury.
It worked for me earlier.
oh, is it touchscreen?
But I did that. Whatever.
Okay, so as I've said, there's 2 different components that I'm going to break this into, just to try to make it a little easier to understand. So the first part is to redesignate and rezone the property that I've identified in red here which is at the end of Dundee Street and connects to McDonald Road as well. And the proposal that's before council is to permit up to 5 multiple unit dwellings consisting of approximately 2 8-unit buildings and 3 6-unit buildings. There would also be, as part of this request, but not part of the rezoning, it's a separate process altogether, would be the connection of a public road to continue that loop, and I'll reference that later on as we go along. The second component being that text amendment, which is to reduce the lot area requirements for multiple unit dwellings in the 2 zones in Salisbury that high density is permitted. So that's Village Center and the residential neighborhood service zones. I pulled some municipal plan policies that address the issues that we're talking about. So the map that you see on the far right, that's our future land use map. The area identified as the orangey color would be the village center zone or village center designation. That's where we want to concentrate commercial uses, institutional uses, and more density within the community itself. And then the other stretch on the zoning map that I'm talking about is this residential neighborhood service, which connects from the rail line up to the highway commercial area. So again, another area of town where we would want to see some higher density happening to take advantage of that main road within the town. Within the current zoning bylaw and municipal plan, we actually only allow multi-unit dwellings through a terms and conditions request. So that means that every time there's a multi-unit, they have to go before the committee, the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee, and the committee would look at imposing terms and conditions on them. The things that we're looking at is the location and access to parking off the street, of course, and onto the property itself, as well as looking at preserving the natural landscape as much as possible, looking at buffering from adjacent property owners, the drainage of the property, and of course, because everybody's reliant on private water systems, water assessment to make sure that there's adequate water in the area to support the development, as well as protect surrounding landowners from ensuring that the water is protected. Last policy is just talking again about that village center and that being that key area in town where we will want to see higher density institutional uses and that greater commercial mixture happening in the village. So the maps that you see on here on the left-hand side would be the current future land use map, or at least a snapshot of the area that we have identified. You'll see on the right-hand side, I've outlined in red the Dundee property that we're talking about tonight. That would be what we would propose to change the map to if the bylaw is successful in passing. But you'll note right now, it's currently just designated as residential. Under the existing zoning, again, it's zoned residential, which is our lower density zone within the residential development of the village, or sorry, the town now. Currently, the particular property, which is outlined in red again, is vacant. It is one of the larger lots within this particular area of the town. And this is the proposed site. I'm not going to keep repeating how much he's proposing, but essentially this is the density that he could do at the max. And then, you know, certainly he could mix that up to less density in the future if he chose, just not going over. At current time, he's proposing to, or the applicant is proposing that each building would contain at least 1 to 2 affordable CMHC housing units, as well as a barrier-free unit is required under building code anyway to be incorporated into each of the buildings. So barrier-free being, you know, grab bars, wider door frames, lower countertops, those kind of things. The property is located in close proximity to urban amenities and abuts the core area of the town. So that does make it one of the reasons why you would see this particular type of request coming before council. Yes, and currently your residential zone only permits, so that yellow area would only permit 1 or duplex. It would not go up to, anything over that level of development. Just an aerial image to kind of help you get your context, the star being the current location of the property. This is a snapshot of the boundary and service map, which is adopted as part of the municipal plan. You'll notice the orange line that's drawn between Dundee and McDonald. So this is an important road network connection that was recognized when we were forming the municipal plan and zoning bylaw to make sure that we have connection points through residential neighborhoods, making sure that there's alternative ins and outs so that we're not feeding off of dead end streets. Ideal for emergency purposes of getting people in and out of neighborhoods if need be. In the upper right-hand corner is just kind of giving a general placement of where these buildings could be located. So you'll see the two larger blue blocks being the 8 units, and then the 3 smaller blue blocks being the proposed 6 units. Part of this proposal, so if council chooses to entertain the rezoning and change the zone on the property, the applicant will be required for each individual building to go through a terms and conditions through the Southeast Regional Service Commission's Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. As part of that process, all the neighbors within 60 meters would be notified of each building that's going in, and they would be given an opportunity to speak before that committee to help the committee develop any terms and conditions that is proposed. He is proposing, if this should go through, to start with the property that I've put the arrow to. So that would be the first 8-unit building that would be proposed for construction. A hydrologist has went out and conducted a water study, identified that there is adequate water to support the 8 units, and from that anticipates that there is enough water in the surrounding development to fulfill the water requirements for the overall development. But again, as part of the process, he's going to have to do that for each building, so it will be verified at that time. If, of course, you can't get enough water, then you can't build enough. You can't build the units. So you will see if this, as this development progresses, it will keep coming back to the community. So you will be constantly notified. This is a template of a concept of the 8-unit that could possibly be developed. So 4 residential units on the ground floor, each with the attached garage, and then the 4 above without the garage. So this, go back now to that third part of this that I was talking about, which is the text amendment. So in reviewing this particular request, which is often the case of what happens when we're doing bylaw amendments and start to review things, we notice that there is a discrepancy between the current village zoning bylaw, which states that the minimum lot size is a base of 1,545 square meters in area that's required for a lot. And then for high density, it tacks on 122 square meters per unit as part of determining what that minimum area is required for high density. So when you look at the provincial regulation, it has the same base number, but it actually reduces the number to 102 additional square meters for every unit over, for every unit over 4. So there's quite a discrepancy between the two. Everything outside the former village boundary right now would have the provincial regulation. So what we would actually be doing is encouraging higher density outside of the village or boundary by having smaller lot sizes than in the village boundary, which is where we would want to concentrate higher density development. So that's why you see this text amendment coming forward to say this should be an opportunity that if council wants to consider, that they adjust their zoning bylaw to match so that throughout the entire entity of Salisbury, we would at least have consistent lot sizes for high density development or multi-unit development. And again, this particular lot size would only apply to those two zones. So anything in the brown or this orange zone would be the only two places that we would allow the units to in the town. The Planning Review and Adjustment Committee is also required when council considers any amendment to the municipal plan or zoning bylaw to offer a recommendation for or against any proposed bylaws. In this particular case, they have recommended both the municipal plan future land use map amendment and the rezone, as well as they're recommending the change to the text amendment for the multi-units. One thing I did glaze over, just kind of going back, is when the rezoning request went through, because we're proposing to do village center for his particular property on Dundee, rather than offer up the full list of uses that would be allowed under that zone, we restricted the uses to only residential uses. So he could not operate a commercial business from that property if he's successful in getting the village center without amending the bylaw. But he could do any combination of single unit, 2-unit dwellings, semi-detached or multi-unit dwellings, provided the multi-units go through the terms and conditions. So again, tonight has been set as community plan under the Community Planning Act as the night for the public hearing. Those public notices have been fulfilled. We did receive one written comment, and I will just read it into the records. So it was from Jessica Bailey, and the comment was, "Don't build something if it is not going to be affordable to the people here looking for a place to live. So many people within the community post monthly looking for accommodation, and then the only people who seem to move here are from Ontario because they're the only ones who can afford anything. So I am highly against this unless it is going to benefit the people who are already trying to live here and support the lower income, since the people already are part of the community should be a priority." And with that, I will put that there.
Wes, do you want to come up and speak, or do you have anything to address?
Public speak first, so I can address it
Absolutely,
after.
absolutely,
That way. it's easier.
absolutely. Okay, with that, we did ask before the session that we have individuals sign up to come forward and ask their questions or make their comments. We'll go in order of the signing. We'll ask Doug Hemer to come forward. Mr. Hemer, how are you this evening?
Your worship, yourself,
Very well, thank you.
your worship, counselors, senior staff, Lori, neighbors. Watched this project with some interest. I live at 27 McDonald down where the Granny Deer comes every night if you want to come visit her. And I think it's a great concept. Some of the fellow counselors that I served with here a few years ago know I had no difficulty in saying no. But I don't see a lot of negatives in this at all. I live on McDonald, on the upper end of McDonald. It's multi-occupancy stuff. It's been there for probably 20-some years and is filled primarily with seniors. I'm not ready to go to those. I'm not ready to go to this yet. But one of the questions that I constantly get asked is, when are there going to be more properties similar to on the upper end of McDonald, particularly when I first came here? Now, unfortunately, one of the people that spoke here that sent in the written appeal, the reality has changed dramatically in the last 5 years, the real estate market. And yes, a lot of people in Ontario are coming, the properties are elevated. It's great from a council perspective that they get sort of more money to play with, but from people that want to come here, and particularly young families like I was 50 years ago, and I built my first house for a $23,000 mortgage, those days are gone. And so I think this represents a good balance within the community. This type of occupancy is right around the corner. It's already there in McDonald, lots of experience with it, although the street's terrible. I think it represents a great opportunity for seniors who are looking for this type of thing, but also for young families as well. So, that's my comment. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Hamer. And just duly noted your comments and, we'll pass along to Public Works, something you said. Now we'll move on to Sonia Levine. Good evening, Sonia. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks for opening it up. There was a lot of questions answered in there, like, I live on Chat. I've been here about 7 years, almost 8. And we like our little town here, so. One thing I wondered, because I know it is gonna come exit onto South at some point, will they be putting in a 4-way stop? I feel like that would be probably necessary with a lot of extra traffic there. And I wondered as well, like, I know the water was touched on, which was my primary concern, which is I'm happy with what I heard. I just wondered, like, they're gonna be upgrading the other infrastructure, like the power capacity, the sewer, all that stuff. Just want to make sure all the infrastructure is addressed and do we have a timeline on the construction at all? And the time in between projects?
I can probably speak to the first two, and then maybe I'll let the third timeline wise to Lori and the developer. If it's not answered from the developer, then maybe we'll ask Lori questions there, because there's track timelines, but from the first two, from the town's perspective. So right now, the intent wouldn't be to put in a 4-way stop, not to say that would not be warranted in the future. We actually have a recommendation coming to council on Monday, looking at traffic in particular, not necessarily in that area, but in certain vicinities. So that could be timely, I guess, if that's warranted. There was no traffic study, like there was no predetermined need for a traffic study as part of this application. There would obviously be a stop sign before you come on to onto McDonald. That's a guarantee. Then as it relates to the infrastructure itself, so right now there's no sewer. That'll be part of the subdivision process that Lori mentioned. When a new street goes in, the municipality enters into an agreement with the developer to put in the street. That includes sewer. That is an easy connection because there's sewer all around it, basically around where the property is, that has sufficient capacity. Power also is part of that agreement. So the developer would have to work with MB Power, who would have to come in and basically size anything. Based on the fact that there's multi-units in that area, it shouldn't be an issue. But again, as part of that process, with the agreement, we look even streetlights, those sorts of things, that's all part of it. So the developer would work with MB Power to put in power poles through that new street. So from an infrastructure perspective, those boxes from our perspective municipally are that property, it can withstand that. And then with water, just to touch on it again, is that it will be addressed with every particular unit, like Lori mentioned. And with this one in particular, there's essentially 2 types of water studies. There's an abbreviated one, which looks at well logs in a certain vicinity, or there's a comprehensive one, which involves the drilling of test wells, which was done on this particular project. So that's always, it's more assurance, I think, from the municipality's perspective, the PRAC's perspective, when they consider those things. So that's my answers, I guess, from the town perspective. But then timeline wise, probably leave it up to the developer when he comes up, if that's okay.
I also wondered too, like, because I know surrounding areas, property values are probably a concern for people. So I don't know how that impacts property values and if our taxes are going to go up and down and stuff.
That is also a good question. So, I don't have an answer for you, to be totally honest. But Service New Brunswick does the assessments. They do look at things like zoning as an example when they take those things into consideration. But that's probably one that I'll use as a takeaway and try to get an answer, because I don't want to say something that Service New Brunswick will regret us saying.
Thank you. I know I had quite a few.
Well, thank you. And we are taking minutes of the meeting, and we will look into any questions we can answer. Thank you very much for that. With that, Robert McDonald. Evening, Robert, how are you?
Kind of opposing. I think that the development is good in one way to have more housing affordable housing in Salisbury. But with, me living on 59 Dundee, I think the lady had said was, as far as tax assessment, are they going up? Are they going down? Jenny, multiple units bring it down, especially when they're 2-story. I feel as a resident. Water issue is another big one. There was a gentleman that bought a property off of Dundee and Braemar a few years ago that come about lot sizes. And he had to make them bigger, so he'd have less housing, less properties for the water. I know you've had a water assessment. I don't know what has changed since that time. I know there was no wells drilled at that time, but water issue and traffic issues are the two biggest issues that I have. And I've heard people talk about as well, as well, but those I'd like to have seen addressed a little bit more, because I know you're gonna do an 8-unit. Now, there's gonna be 34 units if total gets done. If the total is there, 2 8s and 3 6s, I believe is what it is, so. If there's gonna be that many units, that's a lot of water being used.
Yeah, I think, again, Lori did indicate when she did her presentation, each unit after the subsequent initial unit will have to go through another set of studies. Will then come forward, anybody, Lori, living within 60 meters will then have the ability to come forward with another session, so it's not a one and done. It is each individual unit will come forward to be looked at. So again, I totally agree with what you're indicating from a concern, but there is those mechanisms in place to.
Each time water well is drilled in that area, generally somebody, or I know we have a little bit of discoloration in ours, so we're all connected, of course, to that water system that's in that area, so. And it has been that way for years, since we've been there, because I've been a resident there since 79, so. Anyway, I think that's the two main things. Like I say, it would be the tax deal, if our properties are gonna go down in value or up in value. I'm thinking they're gonna go down, but that's just me. The water issue and the traffic, so.
So our CIO has already indicated he's gonna look at the tax component of things. He also, I don't speak for Austin, but he did talk about traffic. Right now, there's no traffic study per se, but as a longer term vision comes along.
I presume it's gonna go out to McDonald Road. That traffic, most of the people are gonna try a little bit shorter way of to get out, for sure.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Robert. Really
Okay.
appreciate your comments this evening. With that, we'll move on to David McDonald. Did you make a seat for Ken? Good evening. How are you, David?
Hi, good to see you guys. I've not been here that long back. I grew up on this land. But that's my brother who just spoke, so he kind of took a lot of words out of my mouth. But anyway, I guess the biggest concern I have is this whole idea about the water. Now, I'd love to be able to speak to the gentleman who actually originally bought this property over here. And was going to develop housing units. Now, I don't know, we never seem to be able to get an answer. Is there an answer for finding out, like, why was he turned down not to be able to build these buildings that he was planning on doing in these lots? I don't, I'm not saying this council may not have been in place at that point, I don't know. But it just seems a little bit like, okay, how come he couldn't do it and he was gonna do another single units, and now all at once it's okay to do all these other units. I'm not being mean here, I'm just,
No,
I'm
no,
not-
no.
just trying to find out, like, if I was that guy, I'd be jumping up and down, but.
Well, I'll I'll be Lori to be public record if it went before the PRAC or if it went before asking any questions around our water studies or anything else, so.
I don't recall seeing anything before. Now, I mean, that's not to say that it didn't happen before, we
Okay.
merged to one. One of the things though, in looking at the property that I could see is in order to develop the property, you have to build a public road. And to build a public road and get the cost back out of a single family individual lots
Okay.
may not be affordable versus doing higher density, which allows more profit to come out per lot to pay back for some of that road. But that's just a speculation on looking
Yeah, I
at
I
it.
understand where you're coming from exactly. I just, I agree with that to a certain point,
Yeah.
but, he wouldn't have bought this property, he had not planned on doing,
Yeah.
like, he wouldn't invest that kind of money. But he was denied being able, from my understanding, to go ahead. There wasn't enough water on the properties to do that. Now, I could be wrong about this, but from what I've been hearing, that's what took place.
So I'd
But
love to know the
Okay.
name and love to know the name.
So
and
there
love
is
to
no-
Look into it, but there's no records on that.
The gentleman's name, if I can speak, was Todd Coates. And yeah, the meeting was in town. Ricky Archibald was on the council at that time as well, so he was in there as well.
So I think, from our perspective, not sure right now, but what we do know is that there's a hydrologist study that was done, stamped and completed with a comprehensive, study, which means that there was two, I think, two wells drilled, I think, as the test and monitoring well, and then it uses a third as well. And again, not to say that didn't happen, but to our knowledge, at least right now, we'd have to look back. That would be even before Plan 360. That would be the Greater Moncton District
I'm
Planning
guessing.
District Commission, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, we can certainly, if something came forward through planning, there should be a record, so.
yeah, there should be a record
Yeah.
somewhere. I guess my main concern was, and I agree, affordable housing needs to be done in this home, and, in Salisbury. There's no doubt that everybody believes that, I believe, but it's just that this whole land, I guess I'm a little more heartfelt on this because this was where I grew up and this is, my dad plan was to have this all as a single dwelling area. As far as I know, but it has turned into senior complexes, which have definitely turned out to be a good thing, I think. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But I'm just not sure about the multi-unit units. I lived in different areas of the country and I've seen some problems with this, but maybe it won't happen here. I don't know what you're proposing. I guess these buildings, are they what they are exactly? Are they going to be, there's going to be some strict rules put on these properties or not? I guess that's my concern, because I think everybody knows what can happen, if it's just let go. But I guess that's my main concern. That's all I need to voice.
Thank you very much, David, and I do appreciate your comments, and water is obviously definitely a concern and why comprehensive studies were required, so. But we'll definitely take your other comments and look into it for that. With that, we'll move forward to Kevin McLeod. Good evening, Mr. McLeod. How are
Thank
you
you.
tonight?
Thank you. I'll use Doug Hammer's greetings. I don't remember who all he greeted, but he did a good job. Quite short. My concerns, questions would be sort of on the traffic side of it. I'm in favor of everything else I'm hearing with the new reflections that we're now. In terms of traffic, if as part of this, there's a connector across from the north end of Dundee over to McDonald. My concern is this, is there anything in place that would ensure that that is fully usable before the heavy equipment that's bringing supplies and machinery and so on is coming in and out on a daily basis for this construction? And the reason for that is that we've already got the bad condition of McDonald Road. And I live on Dundee. I should have, or sorry, on Braemar. I should have said that. I live at 47 Braemar. And Braemar's still in decent shape. Dundee's in decent shape. But if those construction sites mean that a lot of heavy equipment is coming and going, not only for the first one, but the remaining ones, is there anything in place that restricts the route taken to only that direct route that would be provided by the new connector?
I can probably answer that one, just, it'll basically long answer short, it'll depend on the phasing of the different buildings. So when we go through that separate process to do the subdivision or developer agreement, we call it, it will stipulate that the road needs to be constructed before the second building, the third building, whatever that would look like, that would be part of that. And a lot of times, it depends on a project like this, it may not be the case, but a lot of times it's phased, there's a turnaround sort of thing. So I would foresee them probably using that, the long access at the McDonald, Braemar, and then Dundee, unless the temporary road is constructed, which would be part of those conversations through the subdivision.
I would highly
subdivision
encourage
process.
that a temporary usable for the purposes of construction or whatever be done to preserve what we currently have on Braemar and Dundee. And McDonald Road, as you know, it's been this for many, many years. And the sooner you can remove those speed bumps, I mean, you may replace it with something for the speed bump. Just on a final note, I had a chance to tour the Van Talon area that was fire ravaged last year. And of course, part of their immediate concern was the ability to have second exits from neighborhoods. And so encouraging that we always make sure that we have, you know, those, whenever warranted, the exits to get out in a hurry for those conditions. Thanks very much. By the way, I think I said it, but I am in favor of this with, you know, due diligence on certain things.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. I have no one on the additional on the list. Was there anybody in the gallery that did wish to come forward and ask a question? I'll get to the.
So I'm in total favor of it.
The follow process, you know.
It's my first.
My. Next man, next man. You can keep. All right, so with that,
That's ten.
sorry, I just gotta go in from the clerk.
Go ahead.
With that, we now have, I'll ask you to state your name and,
My name is Luke Millette. I live on Fieldside Drive, right behind South Fox Estates. A few years ago, I remember attending one of these meetings, thinking the water test. That was real bother because my water personally, I just changed my filter, it was full of mud again. But it's been going on since I've been living there 11 years. There's more. Our water in Salisbury's got a lot of sediments, something that everybody knows. As property values, like I've heard comments, I thought it was gonna be a deterrent, actually, everything moved up just the same as everything else. I moved to Salisbury because I love the place. I come from a small community myself. Charlotte's not very big. I came over here, I want to establish my roots. And that's what I'm doing. My kids, they're gonna need a place to live and I want them to be close to home. So I'm in total favor of the project that's being adopted or working on. And the development that's in Salisbury would be good news.
so Luke, I appreciate your comments. So you mentioned water earlier and, water is, speak for council, it's the number one concern always with council. It's one that, council is on record doing a water study to look for water potential sources for the community longer term. Why? So that is, and I'm just gonna speak for council. I don't normally do that. But it is it is a number one priority of this council to look at. And we take your concerns very, seriously. Really appreciate you moving here, bringing your business, from Charlotte. So anybody knows, Luke, he's got a great electrical business. So, need more tradespeople in our community, and we do need support it. So thank you for your, so you made your comment, so you're in support of, but it was, the water was just a general question. I just want to make sure.
It's just that, they,
Just want to make sure we're on record with it.
they built behind my place, it didn't affect.
Okay.
My water's still the same. So it's been the same ever since. They drilled holes here and there, made new houses, and it didn't really change.
Okay, I just want to make sure, just get clarity on your
Yeah,
comments, so
yeah.
thank you. Thank you very much, Luke. Appreciate it. All right, with that, we have another individual, with the,
With the
golden
good
pen.
pen.
I'm gonna let you and the clerk fight it out later for that pen. I didn't realize I gave up the golden pen. With that, I'll ask you to state your name, Mr. Allen, for the record.
Ken Allen, I live on Braemar Street next to Kevin. I got 2 or 3 concerns, and I apologize for being late, but I had another commitment earlier. I guess one of the concerns is Kevin mentioned a long way, McDonald, Braemar, Dundee. I would vote against the project if they're not required to ensure they put the shortcut across between their property on McDonald across before construction begins. Only because we have a lot of kids in that area. I don't have any there right now. But a lot of kids, it's a family neighborhood, and we, yes, as Kevin mentioned, Braemar and Dundee are in very good shape, but McDonald's beat to pieces. And that's partly due to water main going down there, or sewer main going down there. It's partly due to the heavy trucking that went down to the modification to the lagoon and to the coastal, the water river, I guess reinstatement. And we all know what happened to the bridge across the way, because they were allowed to haul extra heavy loads across that, doing some work in Moncton, and it beat that to pieces. So I would be against it only on one condition would be that they are be required to put a street across there, or so they can do the construction, as Kevin mentioned, from McDonald and not through the subdivision. A lot of kids use the paths going across to the school. They start work at 8 o'clock, kids go to school at 8 o'clock. And it's just not acceptable to do that. The second thing is water. And I think everybody's concerned. I'm disappointed that this project could go ahead exceeding the land requirements that others people tried to build in Salisbury. They were rejected because it didn't have enough square footage. There is an area that was developed, sold. It could have had 15 lots in it according to the existing thing. And after this, the powers that be in Moncton said they can only put 7 or 8 in there because of the extra requirement for land mass. And I don't know how the council would stand if this project goes ahead and they drain the wells in our subdivision. Who's responsible for that excessive use of water draw in this area? It's not me. Is it council? Is it the city of Moncton or the Greater Moncton Planning? But I would be very leery of allowing, I think the number is 32 units. 32 units on that land. That's almost equal to the rest of the subdivision. And there's a lot more land mass involved in the rest of the subdivision there is there, which are, according to new standards, are under zone. So I'm hoping council would give that a thorough looking over. Next thing, I don't know if it's been touched on or not, but I'm not being negative to what they're intended to be. Just hoping that, and I'm going to use a word that maybe I shouldn't, but it's called a slum area. We don't want to get our values of our land, yes, they've increased over the last couple of years because of everybody's has increased. But, I'm hoping that the developer requires to ensure that the tenant, the maintenance of these buildings want to be kept such way that they don't become, use the word slum again, but you know what I'm getting at. Because there's all family residents all around it. Main Street, McDonald, Dundee, and it would be a shame to allow it degraded with not the proper, are these going to be condos or are they private dwellings or rental?
We'll have the developer speak.
Right.
If the developer wishes to speak afterwards, we'll allow him to speak, otherwise I'll
Who's the
answer
developer?
that question.
Okay, answer the question.
He'll come up.
He got, before you came, Ken, he was given, he asked to speak at the end and he'll address all the questions at
You
once.
answer the question. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, I really appreciate it. You can duke it out with the clerk later.
It's an antique.
Apparently it's an antique, I didn't realize it.
It's an antique. 50th anniversary.
That's that's the Village of Salisbury 50th anniversary pen. I didn't realize it was giving away an heirloom.
You better give that back.
Well,
Nobody wants it, Diane angry with.
yeah,
I have more.
all right. With that, I'll ask you to come forward, Wes.
Kevin said it's private.
I have nothing. But it is used.
So with that, could I get you to state your name, just for the record?
Hi, everyone. I tend to bring out big crowds. When I did one in Sussex, 45 people showed up. So I'm Wesley. I work in Sussex, but I live in Salisbury. I'm gonna go over a few things that I have here. I hear traffic a lot. The plan is to put the road in to ease up on traffic. Water. So everyone keeps saying water study, but let me tell you what a water study is we drilled some wells and then we pumped it for a certain period of time was required. And we monitored other wells within the community, which none were affected. The type of housing, they're going to be apartments. The top units are 3 bedrooms for families. Downstairs units are 2 bedrooms. Or sorry, 2 bedroom plus den upstairs, 2 bedrooms downstairs. And about property value. So I own some big buildings in Sussex. They are very well maintained. If you want to see what type of buildings I maintain, the big ones beside shoppers. They're very well kept. We maintain them well. New buildings tend not to be slummy. They tend to be well taken care of. Should help with property values if you're worried about your house not being able to sell. Never seen that happen in development places. Are there any questions from council?
So I believe, can that address the questions you would have had on the type of units and the?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they're all rentals?
They will be rented, yes.
Timeline, I think, is the only other question that I had noted that we were gonna pass over to you.
Timeline, in the developer agreement that I do with council, my timeline personally comes down to demand. Demand. If the demand is there, it's rolling quicker. And also I am dependent on, the government program, CMHC, on how they roll out their program.
Can you give a ballpark?
Uh,
September?
when do I plan to start?
Yeah.
I plan to start as soon as possible, as soon as it's approved. The first one. Things take time though. Things take time to start. But hopefully the first one is done by the spring.
So can you tell us what the cost of your units are gonna be?
I can tell you the affordable unit. It'll be 80. Determined by CMHC's guidelines. The other price comes down to cost of construction.
All right, with that, I now declare the public hearing complete. I want to just make sure everybody's aware that this evening is important for council to hear support, concerns and questions related to the proposed amendments. I want to just reiterate that no decisions are made this evening. Council will consider the proposed amendments in the context of feedback and questions this evening, in addition to recommendations from the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee at a regular council meeting of Monday, August the 12th, 2024, when council will consider first and second reading of bylaw amendments. I will now take a mover to adjourn the special council meeting of August the 7th, 2024. So moved by Councilor Cowell.
Do we want to wait to make sure there's any questions first, just in case? Okay, that's what you were, just, yeah, just from council first.
I just wanted to clarify, because we talked with the when to start, there is I'm aware of the process, but can you explain maybe just to the, the public what the like at the earliest,
Yeah.
based on our general process, when this could start?
So there's a couple processes that are at play. So the first being to conclude the rezoning amendments, which are required in order to even consider doing high density on this particular property. There would have to be 3 successful readings of each of the bylaws before we can advance there. So first and second would be at the next meeting, and then the next council meeting where a decision could be made would be when third reading would be proposed for that. Aside from that process, that first unit that he's looking at would require it to go to the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee. That is approximately a month-long process between the time that it takes to submit the application, put it on an agenda, write a report, notify the neighbors of the meeting, and give them the opportunity again to speak in a different capacity. At that point, that would be a permitted use. So it would be really more about comments regarding conditions. So usually the most common one would be buffering from neighboring properties. That's when that would get discussed in more detail. And then the other process that would be at play, of course, would be the public road. So the first building, he would be okay to build without building the road, but subsequent buildings, because you're only allowed one multiple unit building on a property, he would have to develop some portion of the road to be able to create the additional lots to be able to build next buildings. So subdivision process involving a public road can, it has to go to council. It has to go to the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee for the location of the pattern. So I mean, you're talking a couple months process just to get a public road established. And then from there, once the road is complete, then lots could be created off of it. Which again, at that point, he would have to go back through an additional month process for the other building. So he's not going to have a quick development just from, not that I'm trying to slow it down, but
Crushing dreams.
just in the terms of the amount of steps that's involved in doing a development of this.
I have clarification there. An accelerated, everything goes exactly as planned is 3 to 4 month minimum to just start the process.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Development.
possible he could get to the first building going in the fall. I would, if everything falls in line. He did have one of the biggest steps is that water study. It does take time to conduct one of them. So that's a big piece of the puzzle because I have to monitor so much water in the area as well. But he'll have to do that for every subsequent building as well, unless he does multiples.
Can I ask which wells they monitored?
We are monitored 2 on the lot. In the Main Street. But it's not adjacent to the lot. You touch the lot.
So if we run out of water, who's gonna fix our wells? Because that to me, it's an oxymoron here. We were been told for the last 5-6 years that because of water, you had to have these humongous lots. A couple developers tried to use it. They found out that they didn't have enough land mass to make it worthwhile to develop the street. Then a multi-unit comes in, and I'm not against the unit. Don't get me wrong here. But then all of a sudden, oh, it's okay because they did a water test. what's gonna happen to our subdivision when we all either get dirty water or we don't get water? Most of the wells here are in the 130, 140 mark. All right? What's gonna happen? Who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna make it fit at work?
I have a question. Is that all right? Fantastic. This is for both of you. I don't know if there's an answer to this question or not. So I haven't sat on council for long, but when developers come in, the water study is always a big deal. It's super expensive. Can we do the abbreviated one? Can we get it skipped? Like stuff like that. So kudos to you. You didn't do the abbreviated one. You did the deep water study. So I have confidence in that, but I'm wondering, has this been done before and residents in a neighboring community have had, or in a subdivision have had water problems, even with the big water study being done? Like, I assume discoloration is gonna come during construction, like, I think, right, so I think that that's common, but moving past that, when you do a development, you've done the big water study, do you see a lot of subdivisions that have water issues following it?
That's a question for does the studies, right? He would be able to answer that question.
Right.
So it does have to, like, this isn't just a water study that's, he goes up and does on his own. It had
No, like it's a full-fledged, expensive
he
water
has
study.
to stamp it.
Yeah.
So he's offering that level of verification.
Right,
In this particular case, again, to kind of offer that level of reassurance is because he has to do it for each individual building. Like, it's not that, he has not got approval to do all, if the total is 32 units, he doesn't have approval for that. He has the ability to potentially go up there if he can get a water study that supports, he's not gonna drain all the water from surrounding
There's
neighborhoods.
three main mains in this land right here. One's over the other side of McDonald's, which is hard water. One that's in this area. These two wells that he put in would be in that. It's slow Bob, fairly soft water.
Yeah.
And there's one in the middle that's come see, come south, but they're all full of sediment. And we had a well at the pool at the campground, it was 192 feet deep. And it was great until the demand came and it got to the salt level come up and it went salty on McDonald's. It also was very hard.
Yeah,
I will-
over where the park is.
Huh?
Like that would be just the other side of the gazebo towards McDonald's. That's where you had the well.
Again, we'll refer to any hydrologist to report to answer any questions. But,
The
keep things in the form of a questions, not into debate.
Yeah, I'll stress again, like Lori mentioned, it's one of the bigger steps, the water study through any process like this that the municipality looks at for any multi-units, any new subdivision, certain commercial purposes. One was mentioned for an existing seniors complex. So this is a standard process. I'm looking at the conclusion of the 55-page report. So it's not someone just west going in and saying there's sufficient water. But it does specifically say that based on the above information, so the 50 pages, has sufficient potential groundwater resources for the intended use and will not aggravate any existing or create new water supply problems. So the hydrologist that, like Lori mentioned, has stamped the study accordingly, has put their professional expertise into said report. That we look at. That's what the municipality looks at, and that's what the PRAC looks at. We often call it the magic stamp. So that is the magic stamp that looks at those things. And like Councillor Thorne mentioned, this actually involved test wells. So a water study could be what I mentioned earlier, abbreviated, where it looks at just well logs. So it looks at the depth, the quality of existing or neighboring properties. This one drilled specific wells, so there's no better way to measure and quantify any potential impact than doing this. So that's what I'll stress on the water study piece itself.
Yeah, the only problem I have with that is testing one well off site. And that was on Main Street.
They can all be on site.
Yeah.
There's provincial well regulations that the province has a series of guidelines that hydrologists have to follow so that it's consistent. So they, again, even though they are experts in the field, can't make up their own different test locations and where and why they want locations. There's specific criteria that has to be met. Looks at lot sizes. They have standard occupancy per unit or per bedroom to say you would need X amount of flow. And so the hydrologist looks at all of that information, the same information that's looked at across the province when they're doing these studies. So those test wells would have been drilled in within those parameters.
So are you using that well for those two wells for your development? Are you're doing the, on your first unit, or will you be drilling another? By the looks of it, that 8 unit was up for it. No, maybe I'm wrong. You're building a 6 or an 8 first.
Oh, the plan is an 8.
Yeah. And the other concern I have, I guess, when like Ken was talking about and Kevin about the roads. You, by the way I understand, is that road does not have to be put through on the first development. He can go up and put a turnabout, like there technically is now.
Yeah, and that was a concern brought forward with one of the questions earlier. So that was brought forward and that'll be talked about on the 12th at council on all the concerns brought forward on consideration.
Just to clarify that, 'cause when she was running through it, she said the first development happens before you connect a road.
Yeah.
So that first whole development will be coming up Dundee. And then if you go to do a water test and you can't do another building, that road never gets built. So then everything's gonna come up and down Dundee. Unless that road gets built first.
So I'll speak on the process, I guess, in a little bit more detail into some of the nuances. So when the municipality does a subdivision or developer agreement, we enter into an agreement to have a road constructed by a certain time, whether that's a month or based on a phased development. As part of that process, the municipality at a certain point will require a deposit for the road, so that if ever something is not completed, we have a deposit that we cash, it's in the bank, and we just go and do the road ourselves with that deposit. If in the event that does not occur and the developer completes the road, then they get the deposit back after a holdback period. So we still make sure that the road meets our specifications. Those are also detailed agreement processes with engineering drawings, with alignment to our municipal specifications, all of these things. Like Lori mentioned, the first property or the first unit can go on the property now. But as soon as that subdivision process goes to have another lot, the developer agreement will be needed. So that will phase that in. I mentioned earlier, there could be temporary access. Those are things that have not yet been discussed because they go through the developer agreement process. So, I suspect that addresses kind of the concern about not having the road completed. Those are all conversations the municipality has as part of that process. But the temporary access piece is definitely something that can be discussed as well through that process.
So the sewer will be coming down Dundee or over to McDonald's?
It'll start on Dundee. You extend it off of Dundee. That's my understanding.
McDonald, I believe, is a larger sewer system over Dundee.
That will, I think, and again, our public works manager isn't here. He's the one that has looked at that. But that's also in conversations with the developer's engineer. It's all part of the drawings that get included in the subdivision process.
One thing that I don't feel like really got an answer was that, and it was kind of brought up circling back to the water thing, like if I understand like the water study was done and they say it's fine and golden and all of that. For whatever reason, it turns out it's not fine after the fact. Do the people have any kind of recourse?
This is probably not my area of expertise. I don't know if you have any guidance on this, but the premise is essentially as property owners, I'm around the corner myself. So if something were to happen on my well today, that's the nature of being on a private well system, and it would be my responsibility to replace it. I don't foresee any difference in a scenario like this, but I'm not confident if there's any recourse.
So somebody else causes a problem and it's my problem?
On a private well. Yes, on a private well. That's the
I
premise.
strongly disagree with that in this situation. I want an objection put into that in the minutes, that up until the last 5 years, you had to have this massive lot to build a house to have a single family. And what's happening now is town planning, I presume that's you're from town planning.
Basically.
You're the bad one here. And the village council are allowing a multi-unit to go, which I don't object to as far as the housing, we need it. But they've gone against what the last 5 years or so, we've been.
So I appreciate your comments. You're on record with the objection. I really appreciate it. The council has not made a decision one way or the other. I want to clarify, no decision is made tonight. All considerations will be discussed at council. Again, we spoke earlier, we can't make comments on previous landowners' decisions on moving forward to do or not do, having water studies done on land or whatever the rationale was on not taking place. All I can indicate is that we're following the guidelines that are in place today for any community going forward with this type of proposal. So we're following the guidelines. Part of it is to address and ask the questions, and which you've done, which we appreciate. But we're certainly not changing the rules engagement that were on any other landowner or person that was trying to move forward previously.
That's all I'm doing.
And you're telling us, you guys knew nothing about this. Like a while ago, you were saying that you knew, well, it must have been a prior people who made the decision on this water testing.
No, what I'm indicating to the comments on previous developers trying to build on particular land or doing things. I can't speak whether they whether they wanted to build one unit, whether they wanted to build multiple units, whether they had to put a road in that didn't make it viable for them, whether they did a comprehensive water study, whether they chose not to. I can't make comments on that because I don't have enough information to look at that. What I'm indicating is that this process has been the process that's been in place. It has been followed. It's going through the process tonight. Very similar to any other individual that could have gone forward and followed that process, Lori. I think it's been 13 years that the Service Commission roughly has been in place. So I can't speak for some of the individuals that you're talking about because it may have been before my time, but I can indicate that if they follow the process, we can certainly look at it. But there is a process in place to do that, to ask those questions on water studies, comprehensive water studies that are in place, whether you're an individual building whatever you're building, right?
Nobody on council right now was here prior to 2021.
No, and I'm almost sure that there was no well drill or to do with stuff. So I don't think you're going to find this.
Right. So all I'm indicating is I can't state for the past, and I can't state for an individual landowner that had an idea or potential to do whatever it may be. I can just state that when individuals come forward, anybody, they have to follow the same process to go through to do any of these type of things. So that's all I can state. So I just want to be clear on that nothing has come forward to this council or to my knowledge. When we will definitely look into the one individual that you talked about, whether there was a comprehensive water study, what they wanted to put there. I can't speak to it. It's not fair for me to.
I just find it very strange. Because nobody seems to know anything about this. And yet it seems to be common knowledge.
And you know all about it.
So I'm not
Right.
sure.
Say yes or no.
I know some about it, but I'm gonna get information before I say anything.
There
We'll
was
go through our
15
file.
lots in that area that Todd wanted to develop. It was pre-planned and laid out on a tentative plans years ago.
Again, Ken, I'll look into it. I have no problem looking into it and investigating.
And, I would say in looking at the layout of that, I have no doubt that somebody had intended, because the 20-meter wide across from Chad is left there. So it makes logical sense to me that somebody had intended for Dundee to move around.
That's right.
It's just, so I didn't come into Salisbury until about 2013.
So it's in between Dundee and Braemar. Dundee and McDonald is where it was, right up through the middle.
Yeah.
And there was a street go up there with lots on both sides, and he was refused because of land size for water.
Yeah, and that I don't know. I wasn't here when that application came forward, but if there's a file on, I mean, we would have it. So I
I've
can,
got a file in my drawer that shows it with the plans all laid out.
Can we, just out of curiosity, because we took, when was this? Like, you guys seem to know, was this 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago?
Saying 10, is it Ken? Been that
No
long?
more than 10.
Been more
So I
than
had one through.
When did mom come along?
Yeah, see, and then the plan was drawn up back in.
But our
Probably
municipal
called
plan would have changed
2012.
since then too, right? So.
well, this latest municipal plan is from 2020 was when we
Mhm.
finally adopted it, but lot sizes haven't changed since the previous one was 2008, so lot sizes were the same.
So it was prior to 2008, could have been a different requirement.
Again, for previous to, I think it was David, that asked that we were gonna look into that regardless.
You're not doing family, it sounds. I would have to pull it, I don't want to comment on any.
Not fair to speculate.
Councilor Blinis would love to ask a question for the last 10 minutes.
I just am wondering if you intend to continue to own and manage these properties once you.
Yes.
Any additional council questions?
Can I clarify that we're going to look into whether there's a file for the prior?
Yeah, that was stipulated earlier. I think it was David that you brought it up originally. That was gonna be looked at, so. Okay. With that, I appreciate everybody coming out this evening. Do I have a mover to adjourn the special council meeting for August 7th? So moved by Councilor Thorne, seconded by Councilor Vittori. Questions to the motion? All in favor?
I,
Reminded, motion carried. We are now adjourned.